Okay, I seem to be. Good morning, everybody. I seem to be live there now. I've had some technical glitches. Not sure exactly what the story is. Hope you can hear me okay, and see me okay as well. I'm trying to get a microphone set up there, and I'm hoping that the volume or the audio is acceptable because I've had some technical glitches there this morning. You might indicate anyway that you can hear me and see me okay. And if you have any questions then about the whole question of buying or selling property, etc., feel free to put them in the box there, and I will do my best to answer them. I want to just double check that we are. You might just indicate, if you don't mind, that you can hear me and see me okay by typing something into the box there, into the chat box, and that'll give me a good indication. Because at the moment I am not getting much feedback from anybody. Can hear and see you well. Thanks, Barry O'Connor. Okay, that's a bit of a relief. I've had some technical difficulties, and I'm not sure what the audio is like. And audio is something that's absolutely critically important when you're doing video. But anyway, we are where we are. If you have any questions there in relation to buying or selling property, I'll be happy enough to try and answer them. Or and whether it's commercial property or residential property or whatever. I know it's a topic that people are very concerned about. Barry O'Connor is asking me, what's your opinion of buying a house on or near a floodplain? Is flood insurance generally mandatory for a mortgage? The question of flooding may or may not arise in pre-contract requisitions. In other words, a solicitor for the purchaser will probably raise the question of flooding. But if I'm acting for a vendor, the likelihood is that I am going to ask the vendor, my client, have you ever been flooded or has there ever been any difficulty? And the likelihood is that my client is going to say no, and then I'm going to reply no. In terms of the insurance itself, however, if the insurance company has some knowledge or some experience of the area itself, and it is an area that's prone to flooding, then it is something that may well come up. Obviously, ultimately, it's going to come down to the insurance company as to whether they are going to provide cover or not. I've rarely seen situations where an insurance company will refuse to provide cover, but it can happen from time to time. And obviously, all you can do is do your best in terms of due diligence and so on, and ensuring that you get insurance in place. So that whole area is something that it really depends on the particular property. But there is sometimes, as I say, a vendor or solicitor is asking the client, was the property ever flooded? And the reply then from the vendor solicitor to the purchaser solicitor may well be vendor says no flooding or whatever, but that doesn't mean that it's anything of any huge assurance or give you any great confidence. So that's something to be aware of. Hope you can all see me okay anyway and hear me. And as I say, the audio there, I was a bit concerned about because I couldn't get my good microphone to hook up to the streaming software, and then the streaming software I actually accidentally started the stream just trying to test it, and ended up deleting the bloody thing. So I had to start from scratch again in a bit of a panic about 10 minutes ago there. So if you have any more questions there, I'm happy enough to try and answer them, as I say, in relation to buying or selling property in Ireland, whether it's commercial or residential. I know there's a lot of speculation at the moment about what way the market is going to go and so on, but it's very difficult to predict any market with any degree of confidence. And anybody who tells you that they can are, well, maybe spoofing. When we need to bring back James Lugs Brannigan, I don't know about that, but I'm not sure what you're referring to and whether that's anything to do with the property market or not. I don't know. People have their own views about property and how to police and so on. So Are you thinking about buying a property? Are you thinking about selling a property? Have you any issues or concerns or questions that you want to ask? If you do, as I say, stick them in the box there, and I will do my best to try to answer the questions. Obviously, people are concerned about what way the market is going to go, and there is always a huge degree of speculation about predicting the future and so on and so forth. But predicting any market is going to be very, very difficult. And anyone, as I say, who does so with confidence are chancing their arm, in my view. That's my humble opinion. Are you seeing any change in the property market from a volume perspective or work? I'd say the market in the last few weeks just has gone a little bit softer. I think it's gone a little bit quieter in the last few weeks. We're still very busy, but the last couple of weeks there, especially when there was talk about interest rate rises and so on, and there was interest rates rises, then there is a little bit of a slowdown, I think, from what I've seen. I'm thinking of buying. Should I wait till late next year or even longer? That's entirely up to your own circumstances. It's really up to yourself. I mean, you're trying to predict a market there that's virtually impossible to predict, because you're trying to predict GDP figures and interest rate figures and world events that may oversee or overtake everything and impede any forecasts that are made with any degree of confidence or certainty. For example, the situation with Russia invading Ukraine and so on. Nobody would have predicted that, say, 12 months ago or whatever. And that's a huge factor in terms of driving inflation and ultimately perhaps affecting the property market. So it's impossible. From your perspective, if you're thinking of buying, then if I was you, I'd nearly, well, you have to make your own decision, obviously, and you have to weigh it up in the light of your own particular situation and circumstances. But you should, trying to predict the market is nonsense in my view. Yes, impossible to predict the market indeed, but we all try. The USA, things are cooling off, much different scene in Ireland, I know. USA, remember, has 50 states, and California, for example, as a state, is only one of the 50 states, and California is 50 times or 8 times the size of Ireland. So trying to compare the United States market versus the Irish market is like trying to compare bananas and apples. Simply can't be done. And in fact, in the United States, trying to generalize about the market generally would be foolish as well, because obviously if you have 50 states, I mean, you have micro markets and so on across the different states. So anyway, you couldn't extrapolate much, I don't think, from the United States in terms of this market here. Is it a good time to sell my property? That's entirely up to yourself, Niall, or Neil O'Donoghue, Neil Donoghue or Niall Donoghue. It depends on your own circumstances. The market is good enough at the moment. Prices are pretty solid. And in terms of selling it, and is it a good time to sell? Like, you have to live somewhere. So unless you have sort of a plan B or a plan C as to where you're going to live, then the decision as to whether you sell or not is entirely up to you. I don't have all the facts or circumstances or details around your particular situation. And perhaps, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons, all sorts of factors that might feed into a person's decision to sell or to buy. There's the whole family law aspect of it. There's growing families. There's families growing up and maturing, and empty nest syndrome and the whole lot. So, have you seen the Hawaii property market? No, I haven't. I've absolutely no interest, quite frankly, in the Hawaii property market. It's dire for young natives without a huge salary. Okay, fair enough. What would your opinion be on a FTB buying a new first-time buyer buying new property, bearing in mind the Help to Buy versus an older property and having renovate? Hard to weigh it up with the crazy inflation now. Again, is a question for yourself, Barry. I mean, you really need to. There's the other scheme there as well, the first-time buyers assistance scheme or whatever. We're seeing some of those coming on stream now as well as the Help to Buy. So, it's really down to your own circumstances and how much tax you've paid and how much of a deposit you have, because obviously If you have too much of a deposit, then you may not qualify for the Help to Buy, but you may well qualify for the other scheme, the First Time Buyers Assistance or whatever it's called. So really will depend on your own circumstances. Joe O'Donnell is saying, if you're selling a house with mica and do a mica test before selling, can you claim the cost of the test back in tax credits after you sell? You do a mica test before selling. Test back tax credits. Don't know about that, Joe. I doubt it very much, but you may well be able to throw it into the cost of selling the house. But if it's your principal private residence, the question of profit arising from your house is not going to arise anyway. You're not going to have capital gains tax if it's your principal private residence. If it's not a principal private residence and if it's some sort of an investment property and you might be a builder or developer or something, well, in that situation, well, then you will be able to get the cost all right, I'd imagine, of getting a mica test done, because essentially this would be a cost of disposal, and a cost of disposal or costs of disposal are generally allowable in terms of capital gains tax calculations. For example, solicitors' fees, valuations and auctioneers' fees and so on. Rebecca Danaher, are there any new laws regarding buying property that I would have to look out for? No, there isn't any new laws you have to look out for. You have to look at the ancient, tried and tested laws of supply and demand and contract and bargaining and basically finding a property that suits your particular needs. The law is not going to make any difference one way or the other. If you're buying a property for the first time, you need your wits about you. You need to negotiate as best you can, and it'll depend on the market how well you can negotiate. And you need to use your own judgment and exercise common sense. But there's no laws you need to be concerned about really in relation to buying a house. Gaelic Ireland, can I avail of any ROI first time buyers incentives if I already own a property in Northern Ireland? There's no first time buyers incentives, I don't believe, that you can avail of, quite frankly, if you already own a property in Northern Ireland. But look, it's up to yourself. I don't know where you live. I don't know what your circumstances are. I don't know what scheme you're referring to. Perhaps it's the Help to Buy scheme. The Revenue Commissioner's website is the place to go there for anything to do with the Help to Buy, because it'll set out the stipulations and criteria. You will probably have to live in the state, and in order to get a Help to Buy assistance, you will have to have paid tax in the state for the previous 3 or 4 years. So it really will depend on your circumstances. But coming in from Northern Ireland, for example, and buying here, it's simply not going to, you're not going to get an incentive, I don't believe. Keep the questions coming there if you like. I'll do my best, as I say, to answer them. I hope the audio is okay on this video. Bottom line is, people are concerned about the future and concerned about inflation and concerned about all sorts of things, but sometimes they can get too clever and too smart and trying to arrive at a investment decision or buying decision, and sometimes might be better off just looking at their own particular circumstances and seeing whether they need to buy a house or not, and whether they have family needs and growing needs and so on. That will dictate the need for a house. And sometimes you're better off looking at a house as a need that you need to fulfill, rather than simply as an investment or trying to time the market well or time the market perfectly. Nobody will time the market perfectly. So, you're better off, I think, taking a view as to whether you need a house or not. Have you read my Irish Origin Volume 2? No, I've never even heard of it. Have you read Michael Sarion's Alias Irish Origins Volume 1 and 2? No, never heard of it. Does a solicitor play any role in property price negotiation or provide opinion on that? Say you find a property and it comes out that there's damage or something the client doesn't like. No, solicitor doesn't really play any role in terms of negotiating. It's up to you, the purchaser, and the vendor to arrive at what they believe is the best price they can negotiate. solicitor is going to advise on the legals, all right, but a solicitor is not going to advise on the price of a property or the value of a property, because a solicitor doesn't have any professional expertise in that area, leaving aside the expertise or experience they might have in their own particular or from their own background, etc. But bottom line is, if you want a valuation done, go to an estate agent or an auctioneer. But valuations are only as good as the paper they're written on an awful lot of the time, because they are very much based on comparables and similar properties in the area and so on. So they're of limited enough value, I think. But I get people sending me structural survey reports as well from time to time. And it's all very well sending me the structural survey report, but strictly speaking, I shouldn't really be commenting on it at all, I don't believe, because, I'm a solicitor. I'm not a builder. I'm not a developer. Now, as it happens, I was a builder, I was a developer and could comment on it. But when I'm acting as a solicitor, I'm acting as a legal professional, and I'm advising on the legals and the conveyancing aspects of the transaction. Therefore, sending me a structural survey report, you might as well send it to your father or your mother, and they'll give you as good an opinion, because obviously it's really going to indicate whether there's minor work needed or major work needed on the particular property. But ultimately it'll be down to you. And if you have any questions arising from the survey, and you may well have questions arising from the survey, especially given some of the surveys that I've seen, then you should put those questions to the person who created or prepared the report, the surveyor, because they should be able to answer the questions and should be able to address the key things you need addressed in the survey. Rebecca Danaher, at what stage is the best time to involve a solicitor when buying a property? The volume is fine. The best time, Rebecca, is probably just when you go sale agreed. When you go sale agreed, you're going to need a solicitor then at that stage, because the estate agent is going to be asking you who's acting for you, and you'll have to be able to give a name of a solicitor who's going to act for you. So you're time enough then. Now, you could make contact with a solicitor in advance of that, and just make contact and make yourself known and give them your photo ID and household bill and so on, because that's anti-money laundering documentation that the solicitor will need. But strictly speaking, there's no need to contact the solicitor before you go sale agreed. After you go sale agreed, by all means, let the solicitor know, and you'll be letting the estate agent know. Mikey K, the Revenue Property Register is a very good indicator of real property prices. Yeah, the Revenue Property Register is good, or the whatever you call that thing. I'm not sure whether it's called a Revenue Property Register or not, but it is useful. Linus MC, have you seen a normal person being able to gear mortgages to become a property mogul? Yes, I've seen a normal person being able to gear mortgages to become a property mogul, and I've seen them been able to gear mortgages to lose their absolute shirt. I have a special experience, or particular experience myself, of this, because I bet the farm, quite frankly, in the property market back in 2006, 7 and 8, and felt the brunt of it. And at the time, just in terms of gearing and leverage and so on and so forth, the two wealthiest men in Ireland were Sean Quinn and Dr. A.J.F. O'Reilly, and both of those men really went bankrupt after that. And they both went bankrupt either as a direct or indirect consequence of the property crash. And that's what happens when a market goes against you. Sometimes when the tide goes out, it goes out, and it just leaves you stranded, and that's it. So you can gear all you like, and you can become a property mogul if you like, but there's always an element of risk when you are gearing and leveraging and borrowing and topping up and so on and so forth. That's the nature of the game, and some people are cut out for that, and some people are not cut out for that. Gaelic Ireland, is there much substantial difference between a long-term leasehold, say 1,000 years, and owning the land outright? In my own case, the long-term leasehold collector wants 1p per year, so immaterial. There's no difference between being a long-term or having a long lease and a freehold. And you're asking there about owning the land outright. You don't actually own the land outright. What you own is an interest in the land, because nobody owns land or property. What you own is a legal interest in it. And so you can own a freehold interest, or you can own a long leasehold of 1,000 years. It makes no difference really to all practical purposes. And ordinarily in the Republic of Ireland, and I note that you're in Northern Ireland, so I can't really advise you on Northern Ireland property, but in the Republic of Ireland, there's a ground rents scheme whereby if you are the owner of a long leasehold, you're entitled to buy out the ground rent. So you can turn your long leasehold into a freehold if that's what you want to do. Sounds like you'll be an excellent solicitor to hire when it comes. Look, it's up to yourself, SK. It's up to yourself. Many thanks for answering this stream. You have a great channel on Friday. Thanks, Barry O'Connor. Thank you. Anyway, any more questions there, you can keep them coming. Obviously, like this gentleman here, or woman, lady from Gaelic Ireland is asking me questions there about the UK situation or Northern Ireland situation. I can't really advise on that. I'm not giving advice anyway. It's only a live stream on YouTube, and I'm giving general information. But I mean, I get people asking me for advice all the time from all over the bloody place, including the UK, and I can't advise people in the UK because I have no knowledge of the law. I know it's similar to the Republic of Ireland, but we have our own laws and so on. There would be probably some subtle and some significant differences between the two. Yeah, similar in the north. You can buy out the leasehold if you want to. You think it'll cost about €100 or £100. Yeah, same story here. So the difference between freehold and long leasehold, there isn't a huge difference. Doesn't make any difference. And just on that point of a leasehold, anybody who's buying an apartment, they may not be aware of it, but if they're buying an apartment, they're buying a leasehold interest. So there's nothing to worry about from that perspective, because the lease will be for 500 years or longer. But that's what they're buying, and there's no big difficulty about that. The reason that an apartment has to be sold by leasehold is because there's going to be a number of people, a number of property owners living in the same or holding interests in the same block. And there has to be a management company or somebody who can basically determine rules and regulations and so on for people living cheek by jowl and perhaps enjoying the same building and the same car parking spaces and common areas like lifts and stairs and so on and so forth. So that's why apartments are sold in by leasehold and not freehold, and why you have block policies and management companies and so on in place until the local authority takes over the common areas, and even then you're going to have a management company in place to manage the development and collect management company fees and look after areas like the cutting of grass and landscaping and fixing lifts and putting the block insurance policy in place and that sort of thing. Yes, the dirty old days beginning to pick up here now, but Jesus, it was rough there this morning. It was rough this morning. There was serious rain last night as well. We went to see that new movie actually last night there, the one with the Banshees of Inisherin, or whatever you call it, the Martin McDonagh film, and it was very good. I'd highly recommend it. Very, very enjoyable. And funnily enough, we were in the View cinema in Liffey Valley Shopping Centre, and Liffey Valley now I see are after introducing the parking situation. Now, we were free last night, but I think we're going to be paying for parking at Christmas time, Christmas shopping and that sort of thing. So that'll come as a bit of a shock to people who visit the Liffey Valley. Linus MC, the process in Dublin is that I have to sell before I buy a house. Is that the norm everywhere else in the country? Or is it the value of the first property and a leverage event against new property? The process in Dublin is I have to sell before I buy a house. Is that the norm? Not really sure what you're asking me there, Linus. Do tax issues arise when getting a mortgage? Applying for approval and banks require a lot of detailed information. Haven't applied for help to buy, but I presume taxes paid, etc., will be an element. Well, taxes paid will determine, I think it's taxes paid for the previous 4 years, will determine how much of a help to buy assistance you're going to be entitled to. I think the maximum is €30,000, but it is determined by the amount of tax you've paid in the previous, I think it's 4 years. So tax is a factor there. So tax issues do arise when getting, well, not really when getting a mortgage, but obviously your accounts, if you're self-employed, and your P60 and your annual salary and so on, and your security of tenure in your job will be big factors when you're getting a mortgage, because you'll have great difficulty getting a mortgage if you're not full-time in the job and if you're not permanent. Natasha Midgley, just dropping in from Australia, originally from Belfast. I'm looking for a cottage with about 10 acres of land. Is there anything in particular I should know when looking rural in Ireland? Not really, Natasha. No, I mean, you need just to, shop around and do as much research as you can. Probably go to the Daft website, daft.ie, or the My Home website, and do as much research as you can. But obviously, it would be sensible to pay a visit, maybe line up a few properties that you have an interest in, and then pay a visit and check them out. But you want to be very careful about the legal aspects of buying, and the whole question, especially with a rural property, of rights of way and properties being down boreens and being down farmers' lanes and so on. That type of thing is common enough. So you really do need to be careful about the legals, because you might fall in love with a property and you might see a property that you think is great value and so on. But the bottom line is you need to get the legals checked out, because without that, you're going to be in, you could be in for a bit of a shock. I considered buying an apartment about a year ago, but I'd feel more like living in someone else's building gratis rather than owning outright, so I didn't go ahead with it. Well, that's your choice, Gaelic Ireland. Some people are happy enough to live in apartments, and some people prefer the 3-bed semi and so on, and that's just the way it is. There's advantages and disadvantages to buying an apartment. Obviously, the advantage would be they're going to be generally, if all things being equal, going to be cheaper than houses. And they're going to be low maintenance then as well, in terms of if you're an older person or a retired person or a retired couple, perhaps you're not going to be up for the cutting grass and keeping lawns and all that crack. So you might be happy with the low maintenance aspect of an apartment. On the other hand, if you're a young couple and you have a growing family, or you're beginning to start a family, well, then you're not going to be too happy with the apartment. You're going to need somewhere bigger. So yes, we all have to make these trade-offs between what we want and what's perfect and what we can afford. And you'll never get a perfect place. Is there any rule of thumb these days for a time frame from sale agreed to walking in the door? Would 2 weeks be optimistic? 2 weeks would be wildly optimistic, quite frankly. You're looking more like 2 months. But it's like every transaction is like a child. It's unique and it's individual, and it does depend on its particular circumstances. And you really can't be too prescriptive or too confident in terms of a forecast from start to finish. So we've done them in 2 weeks, but we've done them in 2 months, and some properties have dragged on for many months, 4 to 6 months. So it really depends on the circumstances, and it depends how quickly the vendor solicitor gets contracts out, and it'll also depend on the circumstances of the vendors as well, who may be buying somewhere else, or maybe buying a replacement property, or may have moved out already. So, all of those circumstances will feed in ultimately to how quickly a sale will complete from going sale agreed to completion of the sale. We went sale agreed in November, didn't get the keys until early February. Solicitors, estate agents, it's all down tools for Christmas. So we were left in the lurch. That's the story, yeah, and it can happen very, very easily. And even without Christmas, it can happen. But sometimes people don't understand that there's stuff going on behind the scenes as well that they mightn't be aware of. For example, a vendor may well tell their solicitor or confirm to the solicitor that yes, they did build a garage without planning permission, or they did convert the attic, etc. And that may well give rise then to certificates of compliance or certificates of exemption having to be procured from a surveyor or an architect. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people may not know about or take into account. And they may think that solicitors are very slow, etc., etc. Some are and some are not. But all the paperwork has to be in order, and sometimes there may well be a delay that seems to be inordinate and inexplicable, but quite frankly, often there's an explanation for it. Is there a register of the floodplain areas, and is this a big problem? There is no register of floodplain areas, and I don't believe it's a big problem. I think you'd be very unlucky to have a problem with a floodplain issue, but you will have to do a bit of research yourself locally, and you will have to get a structural survey done, and your surveyor may be able to get some information for you, or at least give you some steer as to whether the property is likely to be prone to flooding or not. But I haven't come across it as a significant problem, to be honest with you. Deet, I have a deposit for a house. Do you think I should sit on it for a year or two? Deet, it's entirely up to you what you do with your money. I'm not going to tell you how to spend it. Is DIY conveyancing a thing in Ireland? I see it's an option in the UK, but looks awfully complicated and fraught with risk to save a few grand. DIY conveyancing is not a thing in Ireland. It's not permissible. You need a solicitor, and that's just the way it is. The system here insists that you need a solicitor. And remember, when you are buying a property, the likelihood is there's going to be a mortgage involved. Some people are lucky enough to be able to buy a property for cash, but most people are borrowing. And if they are, then a bank is simply not going to put up with a DIY conveyancing situation, even if it was possible, and it's not possible in Ireland. Buzz Cagney, buying a two-bed apartment with the view of buying a forever home as well in the next 5 years. My wish is to hold on to the apartment in the future as an investment. Is this advisable given tax on income? It's entirely up to yourself, Buzz, whether it's advisable or not. You're talking about an investment situation there, and you need to weigh up carefully your willingness to take risk, your aversion to risk, what sort of asset class you like, what are your tax circumstances, have you an accountant, have you any understanding of what the tax regime is, the case 5 income is in rental income for properties, etc. Do you know how the tax is calculated? These are all factors that you need to look into. They're all issues you need to really look closely at. But the bottom line is, A, you need to consider what sort of an asset you wish to invest in, and B, your tax situation and your existing income is going to be a big factor in whether it's a good idea or not. So speak to your accountant is what I'd say. Check the OPW for floodplain issues. Not so sure about that now, quite frankly, but anyway. Corrigan 71, I'm late. Bringing money to purchase a house, do you need tax clearance? Bringing money to purchase a house, do you need tax clearance? Not sure what you're asking there, Corrigan, but solicitors are supposed to and do certain anti-money laundering steps, and they have anti-money laundering obligations under law. So, from a legal perspective, a solicitor will be asking you if there's cash involved, the source of the funds, and so on. But the bottom line is, if you can say or explain that you've saved it, or you've come into an inheritance, or you sold an asset or something, then there's no problem. Putting cash into a property purchase is not a problem, and plenty of people buy property for cash, notwithstanding plenty of other people saying that property is unaffordable. If people who were complaining and complaining loudly only knew what was actually going on, I know things are very difficult in the housing market. I know things are very difficult in the rental market. But there's another side to it as well, and there's a lot of people who are in the very fortunate position of being able to buy properties for cash. But to answer your question there, bringing money to purchase a house, you don't need tax clearance as such, but obviously you will probably need to be able to explain where you got the money from if the taxman comes calling. Yurt, have you seen any interesting investment opportunities in either residential or commercial property in Ireland? I'm hoping to join FIRE movement and considering interesting ventures. I don't know what FIRE movement is, but I have seen interesting investment opportunities in both residential and commercial. And I've seen them in my work as a solicitor, reviewing contract or legal packs rather, for would-be punters who are buying or going to bid at bid X1 auctions. So I have seen some interesting properties. I've seen some absolute turkeys, and I've seen some opportunities, and I've seen some people get lucky, and I have seen some people make appalling mistakes at bid X1 auctions. So there is opportunities. There is always opportunities, no matter what the market is like. There is always opportunities because no market is perfect. And but I don't know what the FIRE movement is. It feels very difficult to have any tax efficient investment in Ireland other than pension. ETFs are very punitive with a 8-year deemed disposal plus 41% rate. That may well be the case, but I think our tax regime here compares quite favourably with our European friends and other regimes around the world. And I don't think we're a high tax economy, quite frankly. That may not be a popular opinion, but all you have to do is look at the data from the various tables that you'll see of the actual payment, the effective tax rate in various European countries. What's your take on Ireland messing up the housing situation by trying to home everyone that they can't, but of a piss take at this rate? Not sure what you're asking there, Deet. I mean, my view would be that Ireland are doing more than their fair share in terms of trying to house unfortunate refugees from the crisis in Ukraine. And I think that's a good thing. Obviously, there comes a point in time when there is a limit to the capacity of any society, of any country to house refugees. And we may well have reached that limit now, I'm not sure. But I have nothing in general against trying to do the right thing and the morally correct thing in trying to house refugees. And I've no great difficulty with that, quite frankly. But as I say, there is a limit, and obviously we have our own housing needs now, and we have a limit of housing stock. And then just the frightening situation there in the last few days where refugees are coming in and, they're going to City West or wherever, and there's no accommodation for them and may well end up living on the streets. That would be an appalling situation. So I certainly hope that doesn't occur. And probably it would be better if they didn't come at all, if that's going to be the situation. Hopefully some resolution, some solution can be found to it. What's your opinion on central banks' lending limit change for people? I can easily see prices rising because of it, but it goes against the ECB's interest rate rises. I'm a little bit surprised that they're doing it now, because they are paradoxically relaxing the guidelines when interest rates have risen, and therefore affordability, you'd imagine, would have reduced by reason of the interest rate rise. Having said that, I don't think it's a bad thing per se, and I think that the previous guidelines may have been a little bit restrictive, but were born out of the crash from 2008 and a determination not to go back and repeat the same bloody mistakes. But there is obviously inevitably going to be more money available for borrowing, and therefore house prices will be driven up. The central bank guy there, the guy from New Zealand, accepted that, but he couldn't put a quantum or a figure on the increase that's expected. But that's inevitable. But I don't see any great problem with it, quite frankly. David O'Connor, FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early Movement. Don't know anything about that, David, quite frankly, but I have no intention of retiring early. In fact, the idea of retiring early is something that would appall me. That's just me personally. I want to continue working and I want to die with my boots on. So I intend working until I can't work anymore. But the idea of retiring early for me is like Jean-Paul Sartre saying hell is other people. For me, hell is retiring early. Do you think the government is a bit too Dublin-centric? I'm not going to comment on that, Yurt. I do know that plenty of politicians from outside Dublin make great hay with complaining about what goes on above there in Dublin, etc., etc. I live in the country myself. I'm from the country, but I've been in Dublin. I've seen both sides of the argument, and to be honest with it, about it, I think there's a lot of political posturing done about, the go boys above in Dublin doing this, that, and the other to do down us decent, hard-working people here in this village or this town or this area. So anyway, I don't really have a view on that. You can draw your own conclusions. Any advice for a young couple saving for a mortgage in the current climate, saving in a bank for a mortgage saver account, hoping to purchase in the next year or two? Just keep saving, David. I mean, my view would be that buying a property, buying a house, buying an apartment, getting on the property ladder is a good idea. I think it's just a smart idea. And I think that, whatever you need to do in terms of saving and so on, I think it's a good idea to do it. And I think you should. And everybody has an opinion and everybody is going to share that opinion with you for free, etc., etc. But I think it's a good idea and good luck with it. I hope it works out and you get the money together. Have a good Sunday. Thanks, Linus MC. Buying a house in County Dublin with 4 acres. Bank will give mortgage on house with 1 acre. Can you split title, that is, buy 3 acres for cash? You probably could, but I mean, you need to get the bank on board there. Or else you need to get the vendor solicitor basically to sell it in 2 contracts or something like that. But they may not be willing to do that. They may be wanting to sell the whole lot together as one lump, and it's entirely up to the vendor and to yourself and to the bank. So, like, anything is possible if parties agree. You know what I mean? So, if you can go in and persuade banks to give you money for X, Y, or Z, then there's no difficulty. And if you can't, then you can't. So, but there's no hard and fast rules about being able to ask for this, that, or the other. I can remember driving around a housing estate back in the good old days with a bank manager in the back of a Jeep, and what he could see actually was probably irrelevant because I just got the money anyway, and that's just the way it was then. So things have changed. Things have changed big time. So, but I mean, banks make money from lending money, so they lend money if they think they're going to get it back. That's how they make their money. Jed Imanas Saparauskas, how do you set up a partnership? There's plenty of documentation on setting up a sole trader or limited company, but haven't seen much on this. In order to set up a partnership, you don't really need anything, but it is a good idea and strongly advisable to have a partnership agreement, a written partnership agreement. And to do that, you really need a solicitor. Now, you can have a partnership without a written partnership agreement, but if there's a row or if there's a dispute or if there's a falling out, and that happens very often with a partnership, then the piece of legislation that will be applicable to the partnership comes from the 19th century. It's the Partnership Act of, I think it's 1875 or thereabouts. So for that reason, it's a smart idea to have a partnership agreement drawn up and not rely on old legislation, a 19th century act that is going to be wholly unsuitable for perhaps a modern partnership that may well be involved in some sort of online venture or whatever. So you need a solicitor. Get Iminas, yes. What are the most common issues you see with bid X1 properties? How many on average of them do you see potential in taking account of risk? Most bid X1 properties, most of them, not all, are receiver sales, are repossession jobs. There's no great difficulty with that. The difficulty is that the contract is drafted on the basis of the receiver having the bid X1 properties, the difficulty with them is that the difficulties can be the difficulties can range from, there's a wide range of difficulties, but the bottom line is you're buying from a receiver, and the receiver is going to say, we have limited information or knowledge about this. You buy it without any warranties as to X, Y, or Z. They draft a contract in such a way that the receiver is protected, but provided you know what you're looking for, and provided there's no issue about a right of way or planning or a sitting tenant, then you can get a bargain. But I've seen people buying properties with sitting tenants. I've seen people buying properties that are landlocked. I've seen people buying properties with without mortgage, or without finance arranged, rather, without cash. I've seen people buying properties with planning difficulties. So those situations, the legal pack with a bid X1 property is put up on the bid X1 website, and the same situation applies to the other auction houses. All of those auction houses have legal packs up online before the auction starts. But because of that, you are on notice. You are on notice to check out the documents, and if you don't, you're in for, or could be in for, a nasty surprise. And that's why I provide a service where I review bid X1 documents for potential bidders. I charge a fee, it's 250 quid. I look at the legal pack and I advise the person, and then before they bid at the auction, before they go to the auction, they know exactly what the situation is from a legal perspective. But there is plenty of risks, but there is plenty as well that you could get a good old bargain out of. But you really need to know what you're looking at and looking for. And it's like somebody buying a second-hand car. Like if you're a mechanic or you know your onions, you know the second-hand car game, then you might be okay. But an ordinary innocent bystander, a civilian, buying a second-hand car or buying a property at a bid X1 auction, you'd want to be very, very lucky to get away with it, quite frankly. Do you have a step-by-step guide for buying a property, as in the time frame, sale agreed, when to pay a deposit, etc.? Rebecca Danaher, yes, I have a blog post on my website, businessandlegal.ie, and it actually sets out the time frame. It sets out the schedule of payments, or the payments you're going to have to make, and the time frame or schedule for those payments. And there's a step-by-step guide as well on the website. You can actually sign up for a free report on buying or selling a property on my website. And I have a book as well that's available on Amazon in Kindle format or paperback, or audio version as well on Audible, about buying or selling a property in Ireland. But that information, quite frankly, that you're asking for there, in terms of the step-by-step guide, etc., that's on my website. Go to businessandlegal.ie and you'll see for yourself there's a huge amount of free information there. Now, Barry O'Connor, I viewed a property that had a garage on site. This garage, in fact, was a 2-bed apartment with tenants without planning for such, so it wasn't in the yard. Would this be an issue for a purchaser? It would be an issue for a purchaser, obviously, if that is being factored into the value of what you're buying. In other words, if they're advertising it as a 1-bed or 2-bed apartment along with the house that you're buying, then, and there's no planning permission, then that is a serious issue, serious problem, because you simply have a major conflict between, on the one hand, getting a mortgage from a bank and getting a valuation, and on the other hand, valuing a property that does not have planning permission, because there is a possibility that it's going to attract the attention of the local authority, who will serve commencement or legal proceedings and an enforcement order, planning enforcement order against the property or against the owners of the property. And they can go and get an order from the High Court, I think it is, to knock the house, to destroy it, basically, to demolish it. So that would be an issue, absolutely. Any other questions there now before we wrap up? We've about 15 minutes to go, or so 10 minutes to go. Thanks for coming along today anyway, and participating in the live stream and asking the questions and so on. If you find it useful, and if I've answered a question or two that might have been informative for you, hit the like button there. It sends a good signal to YouTube, and keeping the YouTube algorithm happy is important, for the growth of my channel and so on. So don't be afraid to hit the thumbs up button there. If you have any more questions there, I've about 10 minutes left there, and then I'm going to go and have a bit to do. A lot of the live stream as well is a lot of the benefit of a live stream, just from my perspective, is not so much even the live stream and how many people show up on the day and so on, but later on, because when you create a live stream, then you have a full 1 hour video or whatever at the end of it, which obviously is going to remain in my channel in perpetuity, and sends a good signal to YouTube as well, and they will surface this video when it's edited and so on to searchers on YouTube and so on. So if you're thinking about doing a live stream and you're involved in something, promoting something, and you have a YouTube channel, then one of the reasons you do a live stream would be for obviously just to answer the questions on the day and so on and so forth. But probably the greatest benefit is actually later on, when you have a video which will live on your channel for good. Any more questions there now before we wrap it up? Do you find social media is benefiting your business? Yes, social media has benefited my business greatly, especially YouTube, because I've got a lot of clients from not just Ireland, but from outside Ireland, from United Kingdom and from United States, and even in Europe, from Germany and France, people buying property in Ireland. So social media marketing has benefited me greatly, and I'd be lost without it, and I make the most of it. I know what I'm doing when it comes to social media marketing, and I've been doing it for a while, but it's been a big help. Some sites are good now, and some sites are not so good. Some sites are far better than others, but YouTube is a killer. Declan McKeown, how are you going to mark hitting the 20,000 subscribers? Harry, keep up the good work. Not sure, Declan. I was thinking about that myself there. I'm heading for 20,000, hopefully in the not too distant future. And lately now I've got a bit of momentum. I'm getting more subscribers. I'm probably putting more videos up, but I don't mind that. But I don't know what I'll do. I might do something all right for the 20,000 subscribers. Maybe I'll do, maybe I'll offer or make some sort of a competition or something. But anyway, 20,000 subscribers may not seem like a lot of subscribers to a lot of people, but to a one-man band like me, doing everything himself with a mobile phone or with a camera or whatever, and doing this for a while, 20,000 subscribers is a lot, and 20,000 people with heartbeats and with desires and needs and individuals is a lot of people. It's a lot of people. I mean, the population of Enfield, I don't think, is 20,000. So it's great if we get there, and hopefully we will get there. It's I have a bit of momentum lately, and that's good. Rebecca Danaher, when dealing with a solicitor, is this done mainly over the phone, email, or Zoom? We generally do email, and then you come to the office. Email, quite frankly, is efficient and very efficient, and is effective. So, but there's no difficulty doing having a Zoom meeting either, or a phone call or whatever. But generally, we emphasize email because it's efficient. It's efficient for both parties, quite frankly, and then you have a written note as well of what was said, and there's no rows later on about he said or she said. But obviously you do come to the office then after to sign the contracts rather, and to sign the loan papers, loan documentation, loan acceptance, mortgage documents and contracts and so on. So you have to come to the office for that. Thoughts on commercial real estate versus residential? Any preference or obvious pros and cons? What's your preference generally? My preference generally, quite frankly, would be a mix of the two together. My ideal investment, if I was going at it again, would be a similar property to the one that I started off with back in 1986, with a 2-bedroom apartment over a shop unit on the ground floor. So shop on the ground floor, apartment overhead, that type of thing, or even a commercial property on a main street or whatever, I think gives great potential for a bit of imagination and a bit of lateral thinking, as it were, rather than just a straightforward house. Because I think if you know your stuff and are prepared to work hard and so on, you can really sell a nice package at the end of it to somebody who wants ready-made business and perhaps somewhere to live. And it's attractive to many, many people. So my actual ideal would be that type of property. And my original property, the one I bought way back in 1986, was, as I say, a 2-bed apartment over a shop unit, and did well out of that, and wouldn't mind doing the same thing again if I had to. But there is, I think, scope and potential there for converting commercial premises to residential in towns, because of the commercial scene is changing to the point where some commercial premises, for example, old pubs, are never going to be commercially viable, and may well have better potential as a mix of commercial stroke residential or something of that nature. Anyway, we're getting close to the end there now. We have a few minutes left. Thanks again for coming along and asking the questions and showing up. It's great that we got a good old turnout and plenty of questions, huge amount of questions. Let me know in the comments there if you want me to do another one, or if you want this to be a regular feature. Obviously, I can't do, it would be just boring for everybody if I was to do property every week, but I was thinking about doing different things, and I was kind of half thinking about maybe trying to do some sort of a regular live stream, maybe a 1 hour sort of chat or discussion or show, or call it what you like, once a week. So let me know in the comments there what you think of that. I have been doing live streams in the past, but this is the first one in 2022. And the reason is because I've kind of done property ones before, and I've done employment law, and I've done business and so on. So anyway, thank you for answering my question. Really appreciate it. No problem. Instacane, tuned in late. Interesting talk. Good job. Thank you, Instacane. No excuse for tuning in late, no mind. Daniel Crocodican, if you had to buy 10 acres of agri land, would you buy now, in 2 years, or 5 years? I'd buy it now, Daniel, if I had the money. Thanks, Barry. Thank you for showing up. Good stuff. Well done. You talk a lot of sense. Upcoming young Irish investor. Love listening to you and love the back and forth. Thank you, Yurt. Thanks for showing up. Thank you, Rebecca, for showing up and asking the questions, perceptive questions. So that's it. We're getting near the end there now. As I say, I may do 1 or 2 more, and I may try and make it a regular feature. Some people are interested in property, and some people obviously have no interest in property, but have interest in other stuff. So that's always a balance that has to be struck. So I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to do a little bit of research. Let me know if you think further live streams might be useful, or you'd be interested, or you'll show up, and I may consider doing more of them. Thanks for showing up today. Hit the thumbs up button down below there. Send YouTube a signal that my channel is useful. And Kitty Cataclysm, thank you, great stream. Thank you, Kitty. Thank you, Edward Garansky. Thank you for your time. Okay, good stuff. Thanks for showing up, lads. And I think this thing is going to automatically end now shortly. If you have any more questions, I'll try and get one more question in there if you want. And if not, we'll call it a day. Of nearly an hour done now, so that's probably about the limit. I think this thing may go off after an hour. So, as I said, thanks again for showing up, and hit the like button down below if you found it useful. Okay, we're still live, but I think we better call a halt. Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you.